Hey everyone, this is Sandy and welcome back to the channel. Before we get into video number 2, if you haven't already watched video number 1, I recommend you do so. And that's because this is where the series actually begins and everything builds on from here. All of these upcoming videos are meant to flow together like a story. So you don't want to miss the first video in the series. This is only the second video, so I'm hoping that I can put them into a playlist and then they will all be lined up perfectly for you to watch. So basically starting at the beginning of this series will make sense and it'll make it easier to follow and understand the story. All right. Now on to video 2. Oh, before we get on to video 2, Methylation Man, he stopped by. He's looking over things, checking things out. He has his own Instagram channel or account. I should be saying account, I guess. And if you wanted to check him out, I'll put his link in the description. There he is right there, all methylated up, ready for action in case I mess up, which I will. All right, let's get into the video. So the biggest myth or misunderstanding about B12 is that normal B12 levels in the blood means that there's no chance of a B12 deficiency. And so B12 deficiency is ruled out. But this isn't true. And you can tell by the name of the video why a normal B12 level doesn't mean cellular use. In other words, B12 levels in the blood doesn't tell us anything about B12 inside the cells where B12 is activated and used. This is what really matters, not the actual B12 floating around in the blood. So when I say that a B12 blood test only measures what's floating around in the blood, and it's not telling us what's happening inside the cells, this is the truth. And this distinction changes everything. And here's the better way or easier way to understand it. So, for example, think of your vehicle. You can have a full tank of gas in the vehicle, but if the engine isn't firing properly, the car isn't going to go anywhere. So the gas is there, but it's not being used. Blood B12 is like the gas in the tank, and cellular B12 is the engine burning the fuel. So if the engine isn't working, even adding more gas can't fix the problem. And the fuel just sits there. Just because B12 shows up in the blood, it doesn't mean it's being used. It's as simple as that. And this is a critical piece of information that most people are never told or understand. And in fact, your doctor doesn't even understand it. And basically, it's simple biochemistry 101. It really is. And so, as you know, those of you who struggle with their doctors, what the doctor doesn't understand, it really doesn't exist. And then you're dismissed. So the bottom line is the blood B12 only measures availability. It doesn't represent functionality inside the cells where B12 is required for cellular health. Now, I have to mention that there are other additional tests like the MMA test or the holotranscobalamin test that can give us more clues. And we'll talk about these in future videos. But even those tests are indirect in determining B12's use inside the cells. But having said that, these tests are still helpful because they add more pieces to the puzzle that we're trying to figure out. So now you know that B12 in your blood can look normal or even high, but you can still have a B12 deficiency. And you're probably wondering, well, how does this happen? Well, B12 has to be able to get inside the cells. And if it doesn't get activated and used. And so if it doesn't get into the cells, naturally, your blood is going to elevate. So you could see a high B12 level in the blood, thinking that, well, there's no way I'm deficient. Well, no, you're not deficient in the blood, but you're probably deficient inside the cells. And don't forget that once inside the cells, That's where B12 gets activated and used. So, and also the liver, if it's inflamed or it's stressed out, it releases stored B12 into the blood, which will elevate your blood even higher. So those are the things that I'm going to be talking about in future videos. And this really explains why symptoms are present, or they persist, or they get worse in people with a normal or high B12 level. It's all because the B12 isn't being utilized by the body like it needs to be. And like I said, the bottom line is the body can be B12 deficient even when the B12 level looks normal or even high. This is what's referred to as a functional B12 deficiency. Now, hear me out. I'm not against B12 blood labs. It doesn't mean they're useless. We just have to take them with a grain of salt. We have to understand what it represents. It matters, and it's still valuable information, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. The problem is, in mainstream medicine or conventional medicine, it's treated like it's the only piece of the puzzle. And that's the key point of this video, is that B12 deficiency isn't defined by a low number on a blood test. It's defined by whether or not B12 is being utilized inside the cell. And that's it. And this is where people get stuck. They're told their B12 is normal. B12 gets ruled out. Symptoms don't improve. But the real issue is missed, which is the functional B12 deficiency that your doctor will not tell you about. That's why so many people feel confused and frustrated and discouraged, and rightfully so. So the question is, why isn't B12 being utilized inside the cells? Or what's blocking it from being inside the cells? That's exactly what I'm going to be talking about in the next video. And this is where things really start to come together. So if this makes sense, it will make even more sense after the next video. The next video will explain what actually blocks B12 from working, even though it's abundant in the blood. So that's about all I have for today until the next video. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe and share these videos. This information really needs to be shared. And thanks for listening. See you on the next one.